Hey guys, and welcome to today's video where I thought I'd answer some of your questions about looking after leopard geckos that are kind of elderly or older. So recently Diego here turned 10 years old, and I have two other leopard geckos, Minnie and Gizmo. Minnie will be 14 in September and Gizmo will be 15 in August. And I got Gizmo when I was 13 years old, so I've actually owned leopard geckos over half my life. So I feel like I have quite a good grasp on their care, and also I observe them so much that I figured this might be helpful if you had any questions in terms of what to look out for, what to expect, whether things change as they age. I said on Instagram I'll answer your questions, and that's what we'll do today. Before we start with the questions, one thing I will say is if you are just getting into leopard geckos, please be aware that they can live over 20 years. Of course, some don't quite make it to that age, but you shouldn't impulse buy any pet, but particularly reptiles, because some of them can live a long time and that's such a big commitment to just suddenly take on. Just wanted to put that here because even though my geckos are 10, 14 and 15, they're still not like the max age a leopard gecko can be. So the first question is, do they get calmer or relaxed as they get older? I would say the biggest difference is probably between a hatchling and an adult. So when you first get a hatchling or baby or juvenile, you'll probably see they are quite hyper, maybe a little more skittish. They will leap across their tank at their food. And then once they're an adult, they do sort of mellow out. And I don't think they necessarily get calmer as they are. They don't like slow down as they get older. I think whatever they are as an adult is what they just continue to be throughout the rest of their life. How does older age affect their feeding schedule? I wouldn't say it does at all really. One thing I will do, and this is I would do for a female of any age, is after they've laid eggs, I do kind of cheat a little bit on my feeding schedule, because instead of feeding them every 3 or 4 days, I'll offer them a bit of food every day because I want to rebuild them. And I think especially with the girls getting older, I feel like every time they lay eggs, it's just like so much on their body that I do, give them a few extra waxworms here and there. But in terms of feeding schedule, I would stick to just your normal adult feeding schedule. Kind of related to that, the next question is, do they eventually stop laying eggs? So as I said, Minnie and Gizmo, they're going to be 14 and 15 this year, and they have both laid eggs this year. Actually, both of them lay 2 eggs at the same time. Now, most female leopard geckos, when they're laying fertile eggs, will lay 2 at a time. My girls have never been bred with, they lay infertile eggs, and usually they'll lay 1 and a few days later, sometimes a few weeks later, lay the second. So the fact that they both produced 2 eggs at the same time was pretty remarkable. And yeah, they're still producing eggs. Now, I do remember years ago watching a video where a breeder said at 9 years old the female stops producing eggs, but he may be referring to a female that is bred with every single year. In terms of females that have never been bred with, that live alone, like mine, I don't know how long this is going for, but I really wish there was like a gecko menopause where they would stop, because it does take a lot out of their body, and it does worry me every year, especially as they're getting older. Are there medical conditions that impact older geckos that don't really impact younger ones? So, I've been quite fortunate that I haven't had any health problems with my geckos like Gizmo, Minnie, Diego. However, one thing that always used to come up when geckos were older or sadly passed away was fatty liver disease. But I believe that's due to obesity and a poor diet, maybe poor nutrition, and that might actually be a result of our lack of knowledge 15-20 years ago. So I kind of think that could still happen, definitely, but the more knowledge you have now when you're starting your journey with your leopard gecko, like where we have come in the 15 years I've had Gizmo is so far. The reptile hobby is always evolving, so if you start off with a good setup and good nutrition, all of that sort of stuff, in 20 years time your gecko might be really healthy because it's had such a good start in life. However, There are other issues that are occurring, so like you think of all the generations that have been produced since Gizmo, all the different morphs that have come out since I got Gizmo. And if you didn't know, Minnie and Gizmo are sort of wild type leopard geckos with high yellow in jungle, so they're quite bog standard leopard geckos, but they may potentially be quite healthy ones, because although fancy morphs are very attractive, they can have issues. One thing that came up with Ziggy is because she was a line-bred morph, in line breeding you have inbreeding, and that can be incredibly problematic. We don't know if that's what caused her early death. It was really just out of nowhere. It was quite shocking, but there are issues within morphs. So when people continue to get brighter colours, weird patterns and all of this sort of stuff, other things crop up. Tumours, for one, keep cropping up, especially in bearded dragons. And so you don't know in 20 years time what an older gecko might face. At the moment, as I said, I've been very fortunate. We haven't had any medical issues, but as I said, if you start off good now and you pick a decent gecko that hopefully has healthy genetics, then you should be good. So yeah, hopefully that answered that question. Next question is, do they have a harder time staying warm? Do they need more heat? No, you can keep them at 90 degrees like you would a baby. That is perfectly fine. Next one is, what differences can you see from a young gecko to an older gecko besides size? So one thing I have noticed is when you have a baby, they are very bright colours. So Ziggy, for example, was yellow and pink and orange and almost translucent. And then she became a yellow gecko. But over time, that colour can fade a bit. So for example, when Gizmo sheds, the first day after she shed, there's a bit of brightness, a little bit of saturation in her colour, and then it dulls down. And I'm not sure why this occurs, but in my experience, leopard gecko colours do sort of like dull down a bit. They're definitely their brightest in like their first few years. Next is, are there common changes in diet? I don't think so, but I think the way I feed my leopard geckos has definitely improved since when they were little, because when they were little they would always have crickets with the occasional waxworm, and then I just started to look into feed insects a lot more, and now like my leopard geckos will have crickets, mealworms, morio worms, fruit beetle larvae, calci worms, waxworms. I don't know if I said waxworms already, but they have a variety, and if you can keep that up throughout their life, that's awesome, because sometimes you'll find your leopard gecko, regardless of their age, might get bored of a certain insect. You've gone out and bought like 200 crickets, and this is a week they decide they don't want them. So if you have a variety of feeder insects about, that is great, because sometimes they don't want it, sometimes they do. What age would you consider a gecko to be old? So I feel like old is always whatever Gizmo's age is, because I'm like, she's my oldest, so like she's gonna be 15 this year. Like, to me that is a good age for a female. Like, they can live 20 years or more, but males tend to live longer. I think one of the oldest geckos was like 27 or 28. So, you know, Diego could get to 17 and I'll be like, oh my god, you're so old, but he could live another decade. So it's hard to say for sure. At the moment, I'll say 15 is pretty old. I know some people, like some breeders, will say females only live 8 to 10 years, but I think that's more of a reflection on how well their females are doing, because if you're going to basically like breed them to death, then yeah, they aren't going to live that long. If you have an ex-breeding gecko, a female, then that might have shaved a few years off of their life. But at the moment, I'm going to say 15 is pretty old. Next we have one that says, mine is 8 this year. I don't know if this is normal, but he is starting to have trouble with shedding. Any tips? So I don't think that's actually down to age. It's probably down to a bit of humidity. Sometimes it can be down to diet. What I will say is the combination of a deep heat projector and earth mix arid and misting that soil a little bit just when you see they're about to shed just lets the skin like slip away. I don't know what it is about that combination, but when they shed, it just slips off, and I rarely have any issues. So it might be an adjustment to your setup. Maybe you just need to spray a little more off when you can see they're about to shed, or sometimes it can be down to nutrition and them just lacking a little bit. So as I said, I don't think that's something to do with age, but it might be something you need to just adjust in their care. And the final question is, as they get older, do they get friendlier, or do they turn into like cranky old folks? So I think they're friendlier. Like, I think just because you've spent so many years together, they know who you are, they know what to expect from you, you know what to expect from them. They're just chill. They still come up to the glass, they still want to come out. I haven't experienced them sort of being grumpy and not wanting to come out, but every gecko is so different. Like, they have their own little personalities. So someone might have an older gecko and sort of perceive their behaviour as being grumpy. But for me, my leopard geckos are chill and friendly, so that's something to look forward to, especially if you have a really hyper, slightly aggressive hatchling. So I hope this has helped, and I hope if you're starting your journey with your leopard gecko, you have a long and bright future with them. If you also have older leopard geckos, maybe you can answer some of these questions in the comments below. I'd love to hear what your experience has been like as well. But yeah, if you are new to leopard geckos, make sure you are subscribed. If you've had them for a while and you're not subscribed already, please do. I did see my stats, like the majority of people who watch my videos aren't even subscribed yet, so really appreciate it if you could click that button. But yes, thank you for watching, guys, and goodbye.
Thank you.